we've got a quorum. We now have a quorum, so we will begin the meeting. Welcome, everybody, to the November Community Board 2 Executive Committee meeting. I'm Susan Kent, Chair of CB2. We're going to get started. The first item is approval of the October Exec Committee minutes. Does anybody have any questions, any changes, anything they'd like to discuss on that? If not, a motion to approve.
I move.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I assume there are no abstentions or nays. Thank you very much. First thing is the chair's oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Please,
I want to go apologies because I have to leave early. I just wanted to introduce Lucina Chavez. Lucina, why don't you introduce yourself? Okay, so hello everyone out there. This is a fellowship with the fund from the city of New York. Susanna and I are going to solve the world's problems in parking. We're going to scour the district and see what we come up with and formulate a plan the city will follow. The state will follow, maybe the nation will follow. We have big dreams. Yeah, and I'll be around till I think we're here till mid-April. And thank you. So for those who aren't aware, we proposed a project to do a parking study for the district, bearing in mind all the current thinking about parking, city regulations, demands on the curb space, the city's new plan on curb space. It's not my area of expertise, but it's an area of interest to me. So I'm happy to serve as the point person. But I think it's useful to introduce Lucina to this group because I think she may be very well tapping into the expertise of people of different committees. For example, Shirley, who joined us at our introductory meeting, obviously this really huge in her bailiwick, but she's not going to do this. And so you may meet Lucina over the next few months, and we just wanted you to know who she is.
And by the way, Lucina is the awardee of a fellowship, right?
Yes.
From the Fund for the City of New York, and that's how she comes to us.
Right.
So everybody hear that?
And I'll just tell my report because I'm leaving early very quickly. To the meeting about Lenox Health Greenwich Village. It's a report. We had no resolution, and I hope it will be in the packet and you guys can read more about it. We wanted to do a piece about a study of intra-facility transfer, but it's a little tricky and a little sticky. But there's a lot of information in the report also because they did a big old PowerPoint presentation. So you'll all have access.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. That was actually one of the items on my report. We were very fortunate this time. Both our proposals were accepted by the fund. So in addition to Lucina, we have another fellow who is doing a landmarks project. They will be what is it again? They're identifying, I think, locations where there are violations, or it's some sort of a mapping project, which we very much need. And what's particularly good about it is that this is an item that we have requested on our that there be funds allocated for, and it keeps getting turned down. We're actually going to see it get done through this project, even though it never got funded through the traditional route. So it's a nice thing to see happen. And
Should all be the point person on that?
Nault will be the point person. Susan Ganny will be assisting him. Anybody who has any, interest in these things. We also had a meeting with that fellow. So where, everybody should, if they're interested, please, we will keep you all abreast of how these things are going because they really are quite interesting. I want to remind everybody currently the Borough President's Community Training Leadership Series is currently going on. Just to remind everybody, conflict of interest and anti-bias training are required. There are other interesting things. It's already started, but it's going to be running through next week. Anything that you weren't able to attend, there will be YouTube videos on YouTube So I do encourage you to watch them because I learned a few things myself.
The one about data is really good and the one
Yeah.
about land use is really good. I did the one on bias and I thought it was poorly.
But you still have to do it. So that.
How often you have to do it?
Every year.
Every year for the required ones. And so I don't know if watching them, you know, on YouTube, if you can simply sign like an affidavit, or you have to actually attend the ones where, because I know they took attendance. I took the conflict of interest one, and I know they take attendance. I don't know if you watch it on your own, whether or not that will count. We can find that out though. Unfortunately, they all pack them into this.
I know, I can't make most.
Very inconvenient, I know. We have started the process of reviewing applicants, the first group of applicants for the community facility space at the Paulson Center. There were 7 applicants so far, of which 3 met the criteria to be considered further. The application period is still open. It will be open till April. So by all means, you know, any group, any nonprofit group that is seeking to engage the local community is welcome to apply. The 3 that we received reports about, one was called Harvest Works. It supports artists creating new works using technology. Another one was the Phoenix Theater Ensemble, which is a diverse company of classically trained and highly skilled artists, theater artists. And the third one was called New Women, New Yorkers, which focuses on education and workforce development, focused on immigrant women. But it would be, so there's really quite a range of appropriate groups for this space. It is only 750 square feet, but you know, you don't know until you apply.
And how long would their lease be? How long would they get to be there? And do they pay rent or?
They do pay rent. The goal is for the rent to be negotiated based on what their budget is. The goal is that their finances should not stand in the way of an otherwise well-qualified applicant.
Right.
Oh, good.
And they'll have, how long a lease will they have? Do we know? It doesn't matter.
I don't know exactly if it's a year to year. The goal is, of course, to have a stable tenant that will continue to, you know, engage the community. So until April, the application period is open through April. I don't know if it's the beginning of April or the end, but we still have several months. Yeah.
Long time until there were applicants that were running that.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's hard. Yes, Katie.
Mute. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes. So I had recommended tenants and neighbors. I sit on the board. They work with rent regulated tenants. We have about 20,000 in our community board district. Are they going? Have they been part of this vetting process, or how can we track if we've recommended someone to apply? How can we track it?
It all comes down to the group has to actually fill out an application. It's not about recommending group. They have to.
Yeah, no, I think they've applied. They're trying. I mean, at least the ED told me she was applying, but so.
It's possible that they did not make it past the initial review for whatever reason. I was not made aware of the applicants that weren't, you know, didn't make it through the initial review.
So is NYU doing that screening?
NYU made a threshold determination, and then a variety, let's see, there was people from the borough president's office, from, I think, Greenwich House sent a representative to participate. I participated, and of course NYU, and we're all, you know, evaluating the merits of the various applicants. But for example, one of the requirements is that this be an established 501(c)(3). So if somebody is looking to start up a new venture, it wouldn't be considered appropriate.
This is a 50-year-old 501c3.
And it would
So
have to also be
I'll talk to you offline then.
Yeah.
I'll follow.
And I can ask that specific question about them, but that's where it stands.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of it for me. So, let's get to the, district manager's report.
Very good. I'm just making a note about things. Okay, thanks. So we have a couple of Zoom issues that'll be discussed later on in the meeting. So I'm just going to mention here that the attempt to transition to meetings from webinars was based on the discussion around this table having to do with equity, because of the ability for everybody to see everybody else and not need to be promoted. I understand that our experiment has produced some results that were not intended or expected. One of which is that since there's no registration, therefore there's no registration report. And the other is that, as I understand it, for some committees, having the clutter of the Brady Bunch is an issue. We can talk about that when we get to that on this agenda, but I just want to acknowledge that I'm aware of it and make sure that we continue to work for the best solution for you, at least for as long as we're allowed to do hybrid and choose to do hybrid. We're continuing to find and look for in-person venues, but they are hard to come by. So I have a dual-pronged request. One is please, by all means, refer any leads, contacts, information that you have to me, and I'll make sure that we reach out. The other is it would be great if I were the one to be the point of contact, since I'll have to be the one who negotiates our use of that space when the time comes. So thank you for those that have already done so, and I welcome additional. We already covered the fund for the city of New York, so thank you and welcome. We are following closely the quality of life meetings convened by the Village Alliance, mostly having to do with 8th Street and the northwest corner of Washington Square Park, and its occasional spillover onto Waverly Place and 6th Avenue. The meetings are very well attended. The first couple were a little more on the scale of gripe sessions. Understandably so. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. But they are looking for solutions. The most recent meeting was yesterday, and they had both the Department of Homeless Services and the Manhattan Outreach Consortium there. So they're talking real nuts and bolts about how to get done what needs to get done. Speaking of Washington Square Park, we have been following the efforts to enforce park rules in an equitable way there. A couple of things are changing, though, of course, one of which is that the Manhattan Borough Commissioner for the Parks Department, who expressed interest and collegiality in convening a meeting to talk about how that part of the park is being used by artists and what they call themselves First Amendment vendors. He is now moving on to a different job in city government, and his long-term replacement hasn't been chosen yet. Add that to the fact that the park itself is being redistricted from District 1 to District 2. It makes sense that whatever conversations are going to be had about that happen after January, when we have a full team and a new council member. So we're not dropping that ball. We're just holding on to it for a moment until there's a more stable platform, if you will. And we already talked about the Manhattan Borough President trainings this week. They are being recorded. So we do know that that's possible. And the response I got from the Borough President's office suggested that attending by watching the recording would count, but I'll double check that to make sure.
And if anybody has to submit some sort of like an affidavit or statement.
Like we do when continuing legal ed, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that's me. Thanks.
Okay. No questions? So next, the calendar. The two items, let's see, we agreed that we are not going to hold an executive committee meeting in December because full board has been moved up to the 19th. And there is no human services committee meeting. Otherwise, are there any questions or about the calendar for December? Great.
I have my hand up, actually.
Yes, I'm sorry, Katie, go ahead.
We had been talking about another land use committee meeting, not in December, but the 27th or the 28th, but I think we might have, the 27th might be, have the most possibility. I don't know where we are in that and where we are with, what's his name, George James.
We can certainly put that in to hold the place.
Yeah,
I
that
would
might be a
suggest,
good idea.
we'll hold the 27th for you. That
Yeah,
November?
sounds,
No, well, I'm sorry, that's
November.
November. It's not in December, but it's, you know, still coming up.
Okay, yeah, I don't have the November calendar in front of me.
It's Monday, the 27th.
Okay, and it's an open day right now.
That's
Okay.
the only thing, human services is on the 30th, that's the Thursday, and schools and education is on Tuesday, the 28th. So Monday and Wednesday are the thoroughly open days. So those were the two that we did talk about. With respect to George James, I'm happy to get back to him. I just didn't have a date to give him, and an engagement to give him. So, Katie, why don't you and Eugene talk offline tomorrow about what you want from George, and I'll make sure that that happens.
Okay. Tomorrow,
Okay.
that's fine. Okay.
Okay, great. Now you have the calendar actually for all of 2020. I know that we are, but the one virtue of looking at is that you get to check out now which months are particularly difficult, which ones we may have problems with. So if there's a, you know, to that extent, if there's based on what any of you are planning down the road, you may want to think about, like, if one month is particularly difficult and you're not, you know, heading a committee that runs on applications, that might influence when you schedule your meetings. But we will, of course, be getting to that, you know, a little further down the line.
If I could jump in with one thought on that, it is that City of Yes for housing is going to be certified sometime in April or May, they're telling us, which would mean that our review period would be, guess when, June and July. So we should probably keep that in the back of our minds when we're thinking about land use meetings.
Okay, there you go. Okay,
January full board. Everyone knows like.
it's second to last.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, right? I was looking at the ones they call, you know, for some of these months, we have really compacted in the beginning. And that's something, if we look at the whole year, to have more room in our meetings, because we have a lot of conflicts in there, and that's always been our goal, not to have it. So if we're looking at the whole year, it's actually a chance to figure that out.
You know, there is always, you know, it's always been our practice to hold full board on the second to last Thursday. We could decide to make it the fourth Thursday. And then make so that we wouldn't have months like January where half the month it would be you know, half the calendar is after full board. I'm just throwing that out as an idea. It wouldn't really change anything I don't think they'd create any issues because it's still a Thursday and it's the fourth Thursday. But if we locked it into the fourth Thursday every month, then we would be maximizing the number of open days ahead of full board. You know, so.
Might be a lucky landmark, because I think landmark works. That our full board just catches before. That's why it's cycle.
Well,
That would require us to change. To hear things earlier, make our full board to get to there. Because I think they have a meeting that follows the week after our full board. Pretty consistently.
Okay.
Check with Chanel, that's always been an issue.
Okay, I will discuss it with Chanel. I'm just throwing an idea out there to try to minimize that, condense that, you know, month issue. Certainly something to continue with. Okay, so next is our committee, standing committee working group reports. Arts and culture, Ivy, do you have a report for us? You are mute.
Hi, we didn't meet. I'm in the process of approaching new members to join the group because our group is small and we haven't been able to get together.
Thank you. Cannabis licensing. We had a meeting. We had a meeting.
We received 77 notice to municipality. Oh, there it is. Notifications to municipality forms for dispensary operations here in Community District 2 between October 2nd and October 20th. Actually, 26th. We had several withdrawals. That left us with 66. Of those 66, only 9 submitted questionnaires and appeared. Of those, my notes, I'll say we took into consideration many of the things that the state is taking into consideration when approving or denying these applications. And those things are if the operator has been participating in illicit sales past March 2021, the end of prohibition. Proof of site control by way of fully executed lease deed or conditional LOI or lease. Whether they were a C, social and economic equity, or previously card licensee, C applicant or card licensee, whether they submitted the requested materials or whether they showed up for the meeting at all. So yeah, after the withdrawals, we had about 66. Of those 9 was denied due to proximity to 481 Broadway, which we approved back in last month. That site was already approved by the state, as was Dagmar, which we also approved just before at 412 West Broadway. Those 2 proximity restricted the great majority of applications that we got just off the bat. Those are state approved sites. 2 were smoke shops that are transitioning. We actually checked those smoke shops to make sure they weren't operating illicitly, and amazingly, they were not. The people following the rules. We like that. We love that. I mean, it was shocking. We went in for some weed and they were like, well, we have hemp. Would you like hemp? Would you like CBD? We have that. I mean, there was an upsell, so it felt very genuine to me that they weren't doing that. We asked them, you know, because these smoke shops are sometimes newsstands. There's one at Jane and 8th Avenue that's been there forever, where everybody in the neighborhood goes and plays their lotto and buys their scratch offs, and another one on West 4th Street. And I asked the question, you know, you guys provide a service in the community. I feel like, why do you want to transition, you know? And they said, you know, we want to try this. We think this is an opportunity, and we, you know, and so I feel like they're there.
Maybe sell more scratch offs.
Yeah, well, they can't. That was the thing. I said, you know, you can't sell your newspapers, you can't sell your candy, you can't sell your soda anymore, you can't sell your lotto anymore. One guy said, lotto's not that much money. Unless you sell a winner, right? Because they get bonuses when that happens. So they seemed, you know, but it was great to see these, you know, existing operators in our neighborhood coming into cannabis. Let's see. And one of the CEO of Union Square Travel Agency came back to represent a client or a partner who actually didn't show up for the meeting. And so that was one of the things. I mean, there was no way really for us to tell, you know, he wasn't there to say, I authorize these people to speak on my behalf. And he was the applicant. So those that failed to appear, which was really most of them, were ultimately denied on that and proximity issues. And we received 5 new applications today. So see you in December.
Thank you. Land use. Is there anybody here to present the land use report.
You want me to speak,
Okay, go ahead.
Eugene
Right, say goodbye.
carried the ball yesterday. We had an informational meeting yesterday with the Department of City Planning about the next set of proposals of the City of Yes for economic opportunity. It is an enormous proposal. We're talking a little bit about having to maybe schedule an additional meeting between now and December because we're on a 60-day time clock. Not a ULERP, but we're going to do our best to be in before 60 days. Anyway, we have spoken to George Janes, if I have his name correctly, who is a planner, and he's working with a number of community boards to help them, wade through hundreds and hundreds of pages and identify the pages that are, and the items that are relevant to their community board. I don't know. I want, Eugene and I haven't had a chance to really talk. We both had busy days. One of my biggest takeaways was a comment from a member of the community that, this is about business, but there was no reflection about how the changes in zoning for business is going to impact residents. And in our community, we have already a lot of conflict between business and residents because we have a lot of non-conforming uses. And so I think that's going to be something that we'll be focusing on, among other things. So, but there's no resolution, and I'm just sharing some highlights with you now.
Right.
The resolution is to come.
Of course. Yeah, this was not a meeting. This was not an official meeting. This was an informational event, which is why we were able to conduct it completely via Zoom. Landmarks.
Katie, can you explain, because I don't think anybody understands except a small handful of people, what your plan is for the next month to conclude the City of Yes?
We're going to talk to Mark tomorrow about our relationship with George Janes. He is not free, so we have to, I haven't heard how much money he wants from us, although he did say that he would bundle it because he's working with several community boards. But the idea is for him to identify the areas that, to pull out the 200 pages out of the 1,400 pages document. Every time I hear it, it's a bigger number that we should focus. It really will impact our community board. So that's the next step.
Yeah, what I meant is that you're having 2 meetings.
Yes, I anticipate 2 meetings.
So the next meeting is discussion of the presentation and perhaps partially business or something, right? And then the second meeting is the conclusion and finalization of the board's response.
That's
Right.
what we are hoping. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's.
a couple people ask me questions. That's why I just wanted everybody to.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carter. Thank you, Carter. I know, Susan has signed on with a number of community boards to get more time. 60 days seems unreasonable. Try to get a 90-day clock, but we're not going to depend on that. And yeah, we can't depend on that. So, we have to be ready, in the 60-day slot. And really, that means by the next full board, because the January meeting is too late.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Let's see, any landmarks? Is anybody here to present for landmarks? No.
Doesn't seem like it. Did we skip over equity?
No, we don't.
We don't have
that anymore.
Don't have it.
We don't have it. It's an oversight. It's an old,
We have a very fancy equity advisor now,
that's right.
very expensive.
Yeah, and it's, Okay, the open dining working group, Valerie said she would be late, so we will come back to her. Parks,
Yeah, hi, this is Rich. Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
Hi, we had a Meeting with no confrontation, no big issues. We had a report from Teresa Flores on 3 topics. Well, the first was the announcement that Pasanante had reopened. It had been resurfaced. It was a project that had that was done really quickly, actually, and so we all commended them on that. And it's a long time coming. It's resurfacing, repaving, and the painting on lines for sports activities. You can read it in the notes. There's basketball, pickleball, soccer, roller hockey. Many things are played there. A little league baseball in the spring for the little kids. Parks Department guidelines are that they're not going to really permit it. So let's see how everyone gets along. That was the first one. Then we also talked about a change to DeSalvio Playground, and this was a little upsetting to the crowd. You can see a photo in the notes I took. The Department of Parks and Recreation announced that a climbing wall feature that's on the south side of the space has to be removed. It was installed in 2019, and then a building was built next door at 75 Kenmare Street. And because of the way the building was built, it has some windows really close to this climbing wall, and kids or climbers could jump onto the windowsill of the building. So the building had sued to get that blocked, and the Parks Department couldn't figure out how to curtail the users of the climbing wall, so they have to remove it. That's the only option. So that was upsetting to some people, and we wrote a resolution suggesting that the owner of the building, which again came after the park and the climbing wall, should make some sort of, a donation or some sort of they should pay to move the wall to another place there where the community could use it. So that was that. And then the third was a long-standing thing. Someone had asked either directly to community boards or through elected officials like Senator Hoyleman, Siegel, what's the process for getting additional dog runs or dog parks in the district? And so Teresa Flores from Parks Department talked about the process, and there's a document that the Parks Department has completed and that she shared that lays out the rules for where dog parks and dog runs can be installed in the neighborhood. And I'd like to send those over to Mark and have that posted on the Community Board 2 website. Bottom line is the biggest issue is noise. That tends to be the one that is most impacting is barking noise on residential buildings. So that's the biggest constraint. But we talked about a few locations and whether or not they would work, and they're going to be investigated. It's difficult to find, but we did point out that a new dog run is opening on Gansevoort Peninsula on the north side, and that there's a new NYU created dog run on Houston and Mercer Street behind the Paulson building that's privately maintained, and it requests a fee. So that was it. Not a lot of, wasn't, I don't expect any issues at the board meeting.
Seeing no questions, schools.
Our meeting is upcoming. It's on Tuesday, November 28th. And we have our guest speaker, Michael D. Markowitz, who was a former public member, talking about College Savings 101. What every parent needs to know, that's the topic. And then in December 11th, we have additional supports for asylum-seeking students in New York City Public Schools. That's what it's on.
Great, thank you. SLA.
Okay, SLA 1, we had 22 applications and we heard 13, 7 of those were previously unlicensed locations. And then SLA 2, we had, there were 17, we heard 6 of them, and 2 of those were previously unlicensed. There's a few denials in here. I don't think anything's overly controversial, and all the decisions were unanimous. So I think that just the big thing is we continue to get the previously unlicensed spaces. A lot of the spaces are smaller spaces, and there tends to be a large number of seats requested for outside, even though there's no way to apply for seats outside right now. So that's continuing or going more so. I think that's it.
Great, thank you. No, if there's no questions,
No, I do. Donna, where are you? Oh,
I'm-
can you mention about the, we had the new business about the sound. We hear all these licenses,
Okay,
but the
yeah.
last couple of months
So-
we've
so
had
we had-
something off, our normal track.
Okay, right. Thank you, Katie. So Al Firestein came back again. He had done we had this resolution in last month about the sound bill. I think I don't have the notes in front of me, so I think it's Holden, who was one of the sponsors of it. Anyway, he gave a demonstration to City Council member Holden that put some edits into the bill. And he says those edits are not good enough and wants us to continue to advocate to get the bill changed further. So I think that's it. Katie, do you want to add anything to it? I mean,
No.
yeah, no. So there'll be something in there as there was last month, just to continue to advocate against this bill until they get it right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Street activities. Okay, Will is absent. Let's see, traffic.
Right, so this time we had 4 items, all bills from State Senator Alderman Siegel. So these are all New York State based, and all are directed to promoting, I guess, safety and accountability on the part of bikes and scooters and mopeds. In particular, he really directed the first one, for instance, which requires licensing of e-bikes, but this is for commercial purposes only. So it's a start. I mean, this is not to say that other e-bikes will also along the line be put up for licensing too, but this particular bill is to require e-bikes to be licensed that are driven by the delivery workers for the restaurants and food providers like Uber Eats and DoorDash and so on. So that was 1. 2, let's see. This one requires minimum thresholds for insurance. That is to have liability insurance for the delivery people, which would be financed for the most part by the DoorDash people and the Uber guys and that kind of thing. The deliveristas could purchase their own insurance, but most of them can't really afford it. And even if they can, the bill provides for them being backed by the easiest way to say it is the Uber Eats and the DoorDash folks.
Contract.
Okay, so third was, this is an important one too. This increased penalties for hit and runs that leave the scene of the so-called really crime. And in doing this again, this is a way of trying to have the people who commit these hit and runs and then run be more responsible and stick around. And again, that would be with support from the DoorDash, am I saying it right? And the Uber Eats and so on. Okay. Paul and Carter, I want you to help me with this one, right? Because Carter gave me like great info on this one. It's a good one. The situation is this. Mopeds, okay, which I'm sure you're aware of, are required to be licensed, but most of them don't get licensed. So this is a way of trying to ensure that all mopeds are licensed. And by the way, we were told that the NYPD is really cracking down on mopeds and has caught thousands of them and them down. Let's not gather there are thousands more left. So the bill required that the dealers who sell the mopeds register them and license them at point of sale. And so that they could not purchase the moped until they are registered and licensed. So Carter pointed out some of the problems, and you're following up on what you said, Carter, which was that most of the dealers who sell the mopeds are tiny and have no more than 20 to 40, right, mopeds. And so this would be a real hardship for the dealers. You have to be the ones to do the registration and the licensing, because it would be extraordinarily. So instead of, so we did a tweak, and we are asking for there to be possibly some options for getting these mopeds licensed and registered in advance of purchase, and that they would not be able to be purchased unless they were registered and licensed. So there are possibilities, there are services, right, Carter?
Yeah, you gotta distinguish between a car dealer and a moped dealer, and so the fee structure is so high on vehicles that have a significant markup versus the mopeds, which are very inexpensive, that it's not realistic in the way it was expensive.
So we're just asking for a couple of other options. Also, I said one being, registration also by the actual applicant, I mean, bringing the license and registration with them. And they're also services, pointed out. So that's a resolution, I just want to let you know. And this is encouraging that at least these things are up there for being reviewed, and hopefully will come to a vote and be voted in, because it is a start in getting a handle on promoting better safety, accountability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Another question, because it looks like a lot of the elected officials just switched their positions in the last few weeks on registering e-bikes in their entirety.
That's
I'm
a
just
city
wondering-
council.
I'm just wondering how that impacts.
Yeah, and
the-
too, and I was at the meeting, and Senator Hoyleman Siegel's rep, if you remember, said that he felt that all of this comes out of the state because of DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, which would be regulated.
The e-bikes. Not the
Yeah.
mopeds, so.
Well, I guess this kind of he felt should be done by the state.
It just seems like the momentum is going the other way, and I'm just wondering if there's an exception for
Yeah.
this, because if the senator around the business, if they all have an exception, so.
Well, mopeds are already required to be
That's not-
licensed, but mopeds requires, yeah.
Most of the residents are out.
Yeah.
Yeah. but
And there's
these
a
guys-
big change that just happened. In that,
Yeah.
movement. So I'm just wondering how that impacts the businesses, because I think it was felt it was. Not in the spirit of a number of different things, that it had been framed a little differently, and so, I know Gail came out against it, I think a number of other.
Maybe there's
And why did they come out against it? I seem to recall reading about
Conflict, maybe it will result maybe. So,
on the impact on, say, the EU bike riders, that would be incorporated into the resolution. To take into consideration their burning of living. Otherwise,
Seeing no other questions on it, we will come back to open dining. I know Valerie said, I believe she said 7:30. That she would arrive. We haven't gotten there yet, so why don't we move to our next topic, which is the use of Zoom and first we've made on the committee level, we have changed from using the webinar format to the meetings format in the interest of greater transparency and equal access. There is, when you use the webinar format, people who are attendees cannot see who else is attending. They also are at times limited they are asked there, even when they're asked to speak, if they're not elevated, they are speaking without being seen, which is creating a two-tier form of presence. And it also has a negative impact on our recordings, which are therefore, as a result, less complete. However, as Mark pointed out, we saw some unanticipated issues, in particularly when it came to recording attendees. So this was, you know, certainly this is not, it's not something that we should discuss it further. I'd like to hear what people's experiences were with this. You know, do they want to, should we continue with this? Is there other countervailing issues to keeping this change? Go ahead.
Yeah, the major thing is that the attendees are not being recorded. And either we then have to find a way of making sure we capture all those names or approach this in a different way.
But don't you still have to register to join the
No.
meeting?
No, that's the point, is that you don't have to actually register. And, you know, it's true that would be an extra step, but first, in terms of committee members, you're taking attendance, so you would have that anyway. And it would come down to having those people who are not, though anyone in person would be signing a
Sign sheet.
requesting to record this meeting locally. I don't know what,
Accidentally did that.
I don't know what that means. Anybody who is present would be on a sign-in sheet, and anyone who is remote would be, if you ask them to put their name into the chat, that's how you would record it. It's certainly, the information can be accumulated. It would be an extra step.
So then you're doing an extra step there instead of the extra step with the registration. To me, it seems like registration is a lot easier. Okay, what I would suggest actually is we really, I think our calendar, by the way, Mark, is getting terrific with immense amounts of information. Couldn't we just put in a sentence about you are required to register to attend the meeting online?
May I just run this? Sorry, so there is a way in the meeting that you can require someone to register in advance, but it means that the committee chairs or someone, maybe me, would have to approve the attempt to register. And then you would have a list, but you'd have a task that would go with it. And I'm not sure if that is worth the time of the committee to do that.
How did we do before?
When does that occur?
There were webinars, and you had to register in order to join but you joined it as an attendee, and as the chair mentioned, that meant that you couldn't see who else was in the meeting. And no one could see you unless you were quote unquote elevated to panelists. Zoom wasn't created for this kind of a forum. None of these things were. So it's always a little bit of cobbling together. But anyway, to your point, there is a way to create that list in advance, but it requires effort on the committee chair or perhaps the office if you want us to do it, to do that. And that's
From my point of view, I'm looking to simplify, and to me, it seems the webinars made it simple. You know, you got the names, and that was it.
Set up registration, even if it's a meeting. And honestly, most of the boards and I visit many boards are doing webinars, and many of them don't ever let the public be elevated to be seen. They let them speak at the correct time. I don't know. But Zoom is so much easier. You pull down the registration report. Everybody who wants to attend online registers, be it a meeting or a webinar. And then when you get the list, the registration list, it says who registered, and then it separately says who attended, who actually logged into the meeting for any amount of time. It tells you all this information. And as a chair, it's so much easier to just pull that down and pop it into your report.
And I think the idea is a little simplification.
Yeah, I mean,
I like to see your meetings. That's the problem. It violates the open meeting.
What violates the open meetings law?
All have to be seen present, they need to be
It's
part
not
of.
too often people want to be seen on camera.
But that's-
In that case, do we not let them speak? Are they violating?
No, but it's the other way. That you have to allow it. If they choose, that's up to them, but we have to allow them.
Has there been any instance where people are like, has that happened yet?
I mean, it has, so we only let people speak without being seen. That's the open meeting law very clearly says people have to be seen when they're speaking.
Well, can't you elevate them?
I don't elevate them. But they can turn on their cameras or not.
Just do Google Sheet with the sign in. It's not.
In last meeting that I did, that was Zoom. People were coming, I was elevating people and they weren't turning on their cameras. They didn't want to be seen. And there were board members who were attending yelling. It's seen, there's not anything people, they can't be seen, but that wasn't what was happening. So I wonder if there's maybe, if I'm gonna speak about something on a meeting, I don't always want to be seen. If I'm attending on Zoom, maybe that's because I didn't want to come in person because I've got rollers in my hair. I don't know. But, we can't assume people want to be seen. So if you're not seeing somebody, it doesn't mean it's because they're being hidden intentionally.
Okay, Michael had his hand up. Please, Michael.
Yes, thank you. I have one comment on a slightly different direction, and I mentioned this to Mark at one point. The reason I like the webinar format was twofold. Number one, when you registered, you had the option of automatically putting it into your Google or Outlook calendar, which was very helpful. And number two, you got two reminders before the meeting began. And that I understand is not possible if we use the Zoom platform. So I'm just feeding that back to this committee, that's one disadvantage I found by converting to the Zoom platform. Number one, it doesn't automatically go into your calendar if you click added. And number two, you do not get the confirmations. As a member of the board who likes to attend a lot of these meetings, I found that very useful. And I don't think it's possible, I may be wrong, to do on the Zoom platform.
Yeah, that's right. It's only a webinar feature, not a meetings feature.
So I asked the committee to just consider this. If this is going to be the permanent format using Zoom, I think everyone should be aware that that old feature we had is no longer possible.
I don't think that's the case. I mean,
You can get an Outlook, a Google, you can get any calendar link with a meeting or a webinar in Zoom. You can do all of that, plus registration. It's not different. There are different capabilities. The webinar is more of a presentation, but you can do all the same stuff with each. It's the same.
And Michael, you can subscribe to the community board calendar and that will automatically put it in your calendar without the Zoom link, just telling you when all the meetings are.
I've tried it. I do not want to.
Well, I don't think I want to have every meeting in, but I will consider these other options. Thank you.
Ivy.
Hi, so two things, during, when Mar and I'm sorry, there was a lot of crosstalk. I didn't really,
There was talking? Was that who?
yeah, I couldn't understand when we were talking about when people didn't want to be seen. So what I wanted to ask is, like, when we had it in person, people would have to sign in and everybody that spoke was being seen, correct?
Correct.
So, I think that if people sign in and when they talk, if they can be seen is important as well.
If they choose not to be seen is the question. Do we force them? You can't talk with your face. We can't see your face because in person.
Well, I wouldn't use the premise of we're being forced. I mean, I think it's more like if we went back, in the way we used to meet, everybody that spoke, you actually saw some people who was speaking, and they would present who they were at one point by signing in.
People don't always sign in. I had a meeting the other day and maybe 10 out of the many people that were there signed in. We can't force people to sign in. We can't force people to show their face. If somebody wanted to show up in a mask to a meeting, that would be their right, and say, my name is, John Doe. They could do that. So
Right.
it's really no different.
But I think like the being able to see, I mean, I find it like even when we sign in within our meetings and we can't see somebody when they're speaking, is kind of hard on the communication in some ways.
Then we shouldn't do Zoom anymore, which would not allow, our immunocompromised community members to attend at all. I mean,
Well, I don't think it's like not that nulls one thing or another.
Technical issue with the cameras, and the reason this was an issue early on is because when you upgrade somebody with people with slower computers, it would freeze up their computers and it would take them 30, 40, 50 seconds to get updated. And then they would lose everything. They would lose all the closed captioning, they would lose the transcript when they change. When it's a meeting, everything's stable. Somebody can turn the camera on, they can turn it off, they can do whatever they want, but it's stable. And that's why it's preferred as an option if you're running a group meeting. And because they make the choice, to your point, Maura, what they want to do, where with a webinar, you have no choice.
And I will point out one thing, ultimately, I will have to get, I will have to consult with counsel to determine what, if anything, we are required to do. And that would ultimately override anybody's wishes in terms of if we do clearly have to run it a certain way. If, like many things, if nobody asks, people are free to do it the way they want. If we put it, an interpretation, somebody has to have an official interpretation of what the open meetings law requires, that would ultimately be the determining factor.
I was under the impression that all that was required for an open meeting was for the community board people to be visible.
Yeah, that was a rule from at one point that was made that every community board would be on video.
Well, that is true. That is true. You must, if you are a committee or a board member and you are, if you're a member of that, you must be seen as well as heard. One of the problems we have is that people don't keep their cameras on.
But you could be seen by likeness. You didn't have to be a moving picture.
That, I don't know.
It was in there. It said as long as there was a likeness of you.
Okay, but I
Oh, yeah?
something, that's a really good question. Can't answer that one. Katie has her hand up. We cannot hear you.
I want to hear what Eugene has to say because we did the new format last night and I found it, I wasn't so happy with it, but I want to hear what Eugene was much more in the driver's seat. So I'd be curious to hear what he says.
I mean, I actually had more of a question to everyone else, actually, for the same reason is that ours was an informational session. So it wasn't really, we were kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It wasn't a normal meeting for us. So I wanted to kind of throw this out to the other chairs for people that had a committee meeting this month. I mean, how did they feel? Because I was thinking if this was a normal meeting for us, I could foresee issues in that it was difficult to see right away who was in the committee, who was not in the committee. We had random people from the public turn their cameras on, turn their cameras off. So just in terms of having a consistent view on the screen, it was very inconsistent.
I would suggest for the view that you put, if somebody's camera is off, they don't show up. So you always, that's a setting that you can have, because that'll simplify the view.
For yourself.
Yeah, but you could also do that for the public. And if they're elevated, they can go to the participants thing and read everyone's name.
Well, there's no elevation. I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's no elevation.
If they're on the meeting, if they want to know who's on, they can go to the list. But it won't, like for example, Brian Tate has his computer on, but if we switch that black box would go away.
Oh, yeah, no, I see that. I guess my question was, I have it set on my computer as well. So if the cameras are off, they just disappear.
Yeah.
Because,
I can't raise my hand, but I'd like to.
technically on.
Yeah.
Okay,
whereas these other ones are not.
Yes, oh, welcome, Chanel. Do you have a report that you want to provide us? I mean, let's just finish talking about this one thing, the meetings versus the webinars, and then we have Valerie, and then we will go.
That's what I want to talk about.
Okay, Chanel's report and then her report. Katie, is your hand still up? Okay, what?
I felt with the fact that the attendees were in the same space with everybody else, that Eugene had less control over who could talk. And it was a little tricky because we weren't really having a meeting, and it was who could comment and how we were controlling the comment, what was allowed. People could just start talking much more readily than when we have to elevate them. And I thought that, it worked out okay, but I thought it was a little, it wasn't ideal from my perspective.
Okay. Yes, Anthony.
Just going back to the registration part,
Mhm.
if you do join a meeting, like tonight, without registering beforehand, afterwards you do actually get a report, but it only lists the name and the duration that each person stayed. So if a person just did ABC, right, as a name, right, it's set up as ABC, but you still get a list of names. And yeah, you have to go to. And also you lose the ability to capture their email address, which is useful to us to e-blast,
Right.
afterwards, right? So.
But we haven't opted people into the newsletter as far as I know.
No.
So
Opt people into our newsletter. Chanel, did you have something to add to this?
Yes, we had unhappiness at our meeting with it. People didn't get invitations. We missed 2 who would have attended remotely had the invitations been sent out. And it's very disconcerting not being able to have control. Ours is perhaps more structured in that we have a presentation and one by one people speak. And then when we come to the executive session, we have discussion. And Eugene normally is our Zoom master, and it has worked perfectly since COVID started. I don't think we've ever had a problem with a meeting until this last one. Particularly when we came to the executive, well, 2 things about the screen. The presenters don't have a clear picture of who's on the committee. There's just this mass of people. And then when we came to the executive session, there were just random people on the screen nodding and not commenting out loud. I don't know whether they could speak or didn't. And we always say to people are welcome to stay, that they can not speak. And occasionally, if we have a big question for a presenter and the presenter is still on, we will contact them and elevate them. But it just didn't work well for us with this system.
Okay.
And I've never gotten an invitation. I was late because I was scrambling around to try to get on tonight.
No, look, this feedback is very valuable. And I appreciate, sorry.
I just wanted to add, because I was, you guys hear me? Someone over here. So I actually think it worked really well. We had obviously a sound issue during landmarks, but for the people in the room, I think it worked fine. I think it's just, to Chanel's point, there just wasn't advance notice to him and Susan Gammy as committee chair and vice chair to let our public members know, here's the link, here's how you access the meeting. I think that's, so I think that was the quirk there. And then as far as here in the room, it just, again, since there was that advance notice of the change and we just learned about it in real time, the committee chair and the vice chair just need to know that it just kind of changes up kind of what you need people on your committee to do on Zoom. So it's less administrative of having to raise people and unmute and all of that and the time. And for the public, they keep the chat they don't lose when they switch over and then switch back over. So administratively, it's less work for the committee. It just then becomes about what you do as a member of that committee of you kind of need someone to be that Zoom monitor to make sure people aren't unmuting or sharing their screen, because I think everyone has access to that, to unmute, to turn on their camera and to share the screen. And then I think the other thing that becomes important is about using the spotlight function. So as a co-host, spotlighting, for instance, right now, and again, it becomes about what is the record we are having for the meeting that's going on YouTube, and then what is the record we're having here participating in the meeting. And while we do have the owl camera going on here, so you can see me speaking, if it was just the camera here, you would want to spotlight that larger the middle screen that's green where the sound is coming from, so that that's large for everyone. And then the same thing as well, when you have people from the public on Zoom presenting, you would want to, if you have, for landmarks, we had an architect and I think a preservationist, 2 separate Zoom screens, you've got a screen share. So then you would want to just pin those 2, spotlight those 2 at once. So that's really what it's just, it's a lot less work for the committee. It's just, you need to be briefed of like what it is that needs to be done. And that's, I think, I think it's important for the public to have that equal voice. And again, it's a lot less work from having to raise people up and down, especially during application driven committees. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I just feel that it's a lot of work to try to get all those names of people that you.
We don't need the names.
And we do them in our reports.
You list every single person who attends the meeting in your report?
Yeah.
Okay, but who is, so like meetings where we have 5 people.
The other thing that you can do with that is you can have I think Manhattan CB1 has a Google sign-in form where you join their WebEx, and to register yourself as being in the meeting, they have for their record, they ask people to sign in on a Google form.
So that's the same, that's more complication all over again.
Actually, if I may, I'm sorry for the trouble. I just did a test, and if you click on registration required, there is an option for automatic approval. But it does capture the email address of everybody who registers. It doesn't address the point that Chanel was taking about the reminders. It doesn't remind you, but you do get one email that says you've been successfully registered. And then Zoom will, if you ask it to, will generate a report that'll say Mark Diller and my email address. That's it. It won't tell you how long I was there or anything else about me, but it will tell you that I was there and what my email address is. So that could be one solution to one part of this, but admittedly not all of what's been.
So in other words, the office would do that.
You just set it up.
You can do it.
Let's do it automatically.
Before you just simply
You ask the report.
The idea of this being a burden has not
Do you have
been
people, we
a
have
problem
people
for
whose
us.
hands are
It's
raised.
gonna help.
Please, we have people whose hands are raised. Eugene has not spoken.
Thank you. I just wanted to present, thank you, Valerie, for, letting us know about, just the, in some respects, it would be less work. I would say that it sort of shifts some of the work as well, just to give my experience right before the meeting, for our land use meeting. Again, it was informational, but because we had a different format, right before I was deluged with like people on the committee panicking and emailing me and saying, I don't have the link for the meeting. And so having to deal with all of that right before the meeting started, it was.
These are board members? That's a notice issue. That's.
Yeah, it was a notice. But again, going with like what Chanel was saying, I think and echoing what Michael was saying, I think because the notice is different and it didn't appear on people's calendars and there wasn't a reminder that there was like a lot of panicky last minute.
Okay, Janine?
Communications.
I'm just gonna say that I would hope you can maybe announce this. Every board member, if they lost the link, can go to the CB2 calendar
and click and automatically join the meeting. So they shouldn't be contacting you. And they should know that they should go to the CB2 calendar, click the link and join the meeting. And we need to share that with everybody. So they're not, people need to be responsible for their own calendars. When we had in-person meetings, you put it in your calendar. Nobody called you up or sent you an email reminder. So, that's what I'm taking my pants on this.
So then it really has to be told to
That's what we see everyone.
because right now, everybody is used to being
Like, I can't find.
reminded and getting notes and so on. So if it's a new way,
If reminders fail, like if you can't find the email before the meeting, because you're disorganized or the emails didn't go, it failed to send you a reminder. You don't need to do anything other than go to the calendar and.
so people need to be told that.
Didn't
That's-
work.
It's the new methodology.
It didn't work.
Methodology we're gonna use.
These are simply issues of notice and procedure, and once they're clear to people, they know it. They do not have to keep getting repeated for them. That's a different story than how it operates in terms of the function of a meeting and how people are experiencing it and their ability to participate, their ability to understand whether or not we're creating different tiers of participation. So these are, yes, these are real, but don't let them dominate something that may be more important.
I frankly just want it as easy as I possibly can.
Well, that's all well and good, but it all comes down, there are other, more important issues in terms of equality of access. And I'm just saying that that's not the only thing. Yes, Katie.
Well, the link didn't work for me yesterday, Janine, for some reason. I don't know why not. But I want to say, all this training from the community, from the borough president. I went to a fantastic governance training, the best parliamentary training that I've ever been to. I've been to the COI conflicts of interest many times, but this conversation leads me to believe that we need Zoom training, because I'm hearing things that sound very interesting, but I can't absorb them, in this setting. I want to, fool around with it and learn about it. And so if we could get some really good, training sessions where we can really focus on it, I think that would be helpful to me. I don't, maybe I'll go on YouTube or Zoom, but I think we need something more systematic.
Okay, I don't know how much that I can look into it. That's all I can say about.
Thank you.
Although the parliamentary procedure, while interesting, had some errors in it, I will point out. Frederica.
Thank you. I agree, it's a matter of notice. In the case of the Land Use Committee, every one of the amended calendars in the upper left-hand corner said that the land use meeting was not being scheduled for the month of November. So when the informational meeting came up in the middle of the month, you had to really be motivated to peruse the entire calendar to figure out that even though there wasn't a formal land use meeting, the land use committee was meeting. And I think that might have contributed to the confusion. I hope that's clear.
This is the person who started Zoom. We haven't advanced from calling all the Zoom features.
Yeah.
There are frankly so many other features that can make our meetings run smoothly, but there's not much interest during our meetings because people are focused on the meetings, looking at all the functions, what you can do when you're a host, all those other things. And that's a big part of it, that it's all right there. But to Katie's point, I don't think it's super hard for training. Just a group of people just have to get together and say, let's figure it out. And we did that in the beginning of Zoom. We got Tom on the Zoom. We did a lot of work, and so it's just setting up something in an afternoon and get whoever wants to jump on and walk through the features.
Okay. Chanel, go ahead, please.
I can't understand the problem with the webinar system. From the public point of view, they're exactly what they would do in public, in a regular meeting when everyone's in the room. From the beginning of COVID, when we first had them, I said, and have said often since, we're trying to reproduce as closely as we can what we have in the in a regular meeting before COVID. And we've been able to very successfully do that. And the thing of looking at everybody, people should have access when they need to speak, but looking at everybody is not what you do. You look at the speaker, and the public sit in the back of the room. And this is getting sort of a hoedown feeling about it.
Okay, it's not the same in the sense that people who are attendees aren't aware. They may be in an in-person meeting, yes, the public may be sitting behind the board members, but they're aware of everybody who's in the room. That's just the part of the problem, is that they're not aware of who's there.
So
yes,
that the public can't see each other, is that your point?
Yes.
yeah, they don't know you don't know who's present. Yes.
So for that hybrid, the cameras are pointed at, like when we do full board, the camera is pointed at the stage. You can't see all.
We
the
have
public.
no control at the executive meeting over who's on the screen, is that right?
So, I mean,
We can look around the room.
but if you're watching it, you can.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
If you're attending virtually, you can't. You can only see the table. Maybe a little head floating at the bottom of the stage with the mic when we give our reports, but it's not the same. It's true, I agree. You look at the speaker, you look at the table, you look at the committee, you don't look at the public. And the public is facing the table as well.
So one of the things most people in this room don't realize is that when our full board meetings were live streamed throughout COVID, it was not the Zoom output screen. It was a capture, and it showed all the cameras that were off as well. And that's something that Mark Moss did and said it is only proper to show who's at the meeting with their camera off. So if you go back and look, you'll see any of the board members whose cameras were off, because it was done as a screen capture, not as a Zoom output. Because as an attendee in a webinar, you can't see anybody whose camera's off. You can't even see that they're there. And so, just to Mara's point, that was actually done because that was recognized at the full board meetings. But you're right, the OWL cameras are supposed to work where they point at the people, but because we use speakers, they're sound activated and they point at the speaker, not at the person talking. And so that's,
Okay.
you're right in that. And,
Yeah.
and I think they can be
I don't
set.
understand.
Okay. This, look,
That's some homework.
we need to look into this some more. I need to get some feedback on what is required of us. I will let you know where we stand with this, shortly. And,
Will it be possible to have either or, assuming they both meet the standard? Can we choose which one?
I personally think that we should have one. We should not be bounced. You mean either that people could choose between either the meetings or the webinar formats?
Yeah.
I don't know that it would probably face a whole other level of complexity. So anyway, we do need to move forward. There are two reports, Chanel, your report and Valerie, we did not hear from either of you yet. So I'm going to take a break from Zoom and I'm going to go back to, if you could give us a landmarks report if you want to.
Okay. We had a number of very complicated ones, one of particular interest, and it would be well to read, to look at the application online. I guess it's all the same. You just go to the schedule and look for it and click on it, and the presentation comes up. It's the building at the corner of, or at the junction of 14th Street, 9th Avenue and Hudson Street, sort of a flat iron looking building. And it was one of the most preposterous applications we have ever had. And if you look at it and the resolution ahead, you'll see what we speak about. Two of us thought that there was a mistake in the application materials, and that was our notable one. The others were big but standard. And today, Susan and I met with the fellow who's going to be working with us on the survey of possible landmark. I guess possible is the word. I keep searching for the right one, where we think that something is in violation and that a violation should be issued. And we went around the sort of the core of the village and kind of as an orientation for him to see what things are like, things that we knew. There are 4 or 5 violations that have been forever, and we're able to point them out and why they were and so forth. And we'll continue to work on this. What we'd like to do immediately is ask both the committee and the board, and if there's a way to extend it to public members of other committees, so we get the fullest possible, to send in addresses and a brief description, and if possible, a picture of observed things that may be violations. And that's been effective in the past. We occasionally get things from the public and are able to process them through.
Reach out to people on the, we can reach out to people on the board and, you know, if you see it, report it type thing.
Right. And if you could send those to us, we could incorporate those into the first round and perhaps make a good dent that way without having to look at every building. So we'll work on that later, and Susan, I'll be with you about how to send it and so forth.
Okay, great. Thank you. Valerie, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What was the committee's recommendation on 16 Jones Street? How did the committee vote?
What street?
16 Jones Street.
We recommended, it met the standards, so we recommended approval.
Okay, thank you.
And furthermore on that, there, if you're familiar with it, there's a temporary installation of flowers, which has become all the vogue, and those require a permit, and there was testimony that there was no permit. So we incorporated that into the resolution.
That was on Broadway or.
Sorry, I don't have my thing here. Jones Street, what was the, I don't remember what.
Greenwich House Pottery.
Is what?
Greenwich House Pottery.
Greenwich House Pottery.
We approved it with a lot of questions.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm confusing.
Thank you, Chanel. Valerie.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? So the outdoor dining working group, we had a public hearing on Monday, November 6th. We had a pretty good turnout. We were at PS 41, and we decided, we heard a lot of good feedback. We really focused on there's legs and regs, right? So you have the legislation, and then you have the regulations, which are the proposed rules. So we outline our audience for any sort of amendment to the legislation. We'll go to our elected officials. That was something that Gail had mentioned in her, Councilmember Gail Brewer had mentioned in her remarks during the vote. There are things that are in the regulations and the proposed rules that, such as hours, there's discrepancies. You have a 12 a.m. across the board closing time. in the law. In the rules, the regulations, the proposed rules, it's listed as 1 AM. So do with that what you will. It certainly doesn't mean that that was an error. That was very deliberate, it appears. So we will be responding with 3 resolutions, one on sidewalk, one on roadway in regards to the regulations, and then one on the legislation. So that will go to our elected officials. So be on the lookout for those, and that's my report.
Great, thank you.
May I say something about that one?
Please.
There were very helpful landmark things scattered through it, and Valerie had highlighted them. And this is sort of carrying the landmark comments and everything through, and we're very pleased about that.
Yes, thank you for reminding me, Chanel. Yes, at the landmarks meeting I brought up in new business, we went through where LPC was mentioned, historic district. They're really treating landmark site buildings as like what's attached to the building, and they're not addressing what the historic district is and how the context of that is important. They also don't define in the regulations what a historic district is, and that is in the administrative code about the context. So we'll be adding in some language there, as well as the LPC review period, which is actually listed in the legislation. So again, it's cross-referencing a lot of that, lots of good input from the working group, really good conversation, as well as some people from outside of the working group who have sent in questions and comments as well. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So in residential areas, is that differentiated at all in any of these rules? Because we're enforcing 10 PM closings for outdoor open dining.
So that was in our priority considerations from last year, as well as in our latest letter that we did right as the vote was happening. That is one of the big issues, is the density that residential areas are treated the exact same as commercial areas. So that is a 12 AM closing across the board in the legislation, local law 121, and an across the board 1 AM closing in the legislation. So you are exactly right, Brian, that there is no differentiation in this set of regulations for residential at all.
We were able to raise last week and kind of an update this week from liquor authority that they are going to be pushing the conflict in the city's rules and the state rules, and that the state rules say that you cannot serve alcohol, or you can only serve alcohol across the pedestrian thoroughfare. And so that does not include a bike lane. And so the city program is in conflict with the state law for if a restaurant operates, serves alcohol, and they're floating roadbed dining. We seem to have made inroads. They have acknowledged that there's not, they haven't enforced it in the past, but we brought up the fact that now is the time to bring it up during the transition. And so that's interesting, and the DOT is refused in the past, even though the state legislators had a number of them, including our representatives, have repeatedly written to them. They've been told to go to the SLA, and the SLA has said go to the city, and the city says go to the SLA, and for a year. So it's interesting that lack of communication, lack of common sense, safety, all the different speeds in the bike lanes of all the different vehicles. I can't tell you in the last month how many times I've been followed gas-powered mopeds in the bike lanes. This never happened a couple of months ago. To the extent it's happening, pretty astounding. The bike lanes.
Thank
you for adding that. Yeah, and in the legislation or in the, excuse me, in the regulations, the proposed rules, the floating parking lane is defined in there in the glossary. However, it just says you cannot have a roadway dining setup in a bike lane. So it addresses nothing about the across, again, just passing the buck there. So.
I just have to say one thing. Because we are talking about meeting places, and I thought PS 41 Valley was a really good choice. It worked out really well.
Thank you, Mark.
We had a very good turnout, I thought. Yeah. And it went very smoothly.
Yeah, I think people.
Yep, that's where we're going. That's where we'll be. Okay, thank you very much. If there are no more questions regarding Valerie's report, I do want to get back to the issue, you know, as everybody, I assume, knows, this Thursday's meeting is going to be in person only. It is a test. There is no commitment to going back to in person after that, but we need to see what, I think we need to experience it again for those of us for whom it's been a long time to see what the difference is between the hybrids, which we know we've faced a variety of issues, not only to go back to the experience. Also, there's about 20% of our members who, because they've only joined in the last few years, have never experienced a true in-person only meeting. And we can't ask people to participate if they don't know what that is. Hybrid you'd like to think it sort of was the compromise and offered you sort of a real in between, but it's offering us problems that don't exist where we either fully in person or either fully remote. There's no question, however, that something that nobody will be completely happy. There is things that will be sacrificed. So part of the experience of having a fully in-person meeting is not simply to see the problems that we avoid by being in person, but what we're giving up. And that is going to be including some of our members not being there. So we're fully aware of that, but in order to then have a more informed discussion, it seemed only logical to run a test of this type. I want to thank everybody who provided feedback. I will, of course, continue to accept any feedback, but you know, this is not just a decision. I will tell you that there are other boards that also, it became just too complicated. Yes, there are features that there are benefits to the hybrid, but we don't necessarily have the ability to manage the difficulties that come with hybrid. That's also just part of the reality. We don't have the resources. We don't have the manpower. People are being used, being asked to take on responsibilities beyond the scope of what they're there for. So it's tough. But let's keep an open mind and see what happens. Does anybody have something to say on this right now?
That's voting is the biggest thing. And we should be, Amy's unfortunately not with us, but we should go back to voting on everything as we.
Yes, I do. Yes, we will be voting the way we voted prior to COVID, in the sense that so there will not be a omnibus vote. We're going to vote on each committee's resolutions as they come along.
Like we used to.
And it's important because everybody thinks I was trying to do something difficult for the last board. I had no idea if that suggestion would carry or not. So if you don't have a vote to find out if it passes, you can't put in a substitute. And that's why it's so important that we vote as we go, so that anytime there is dissent, we don't know what the vote's going to be, that you can register it. And unfortunately, we can only do it by roll call.
Right.
When we're doing hybrid, which takes forever. And so the hand votes are important.
We also had problems with when you have people who are virtual and they step away, then they're voting, they could be voting in the end on things that they didn't hear about. It's another, it's in terms of keeping accurate records that people are actually voting on the things that they have heard presented.
I just have a question. On Sound PS for what capacity of PS 41? I know I once knew, but.
All over 100.
Oh,
I think it's probably something like a good meeting for the most part. They put a comment, we are having a full board meeting, right?
yes. We've had many meetings there in the past. The only shortcoming,
The chair to sit there for hours. I only had to do it for PTA meetings, once a month, and it was still negative.
right. The other shortcoming is that we do have to be out of there by like 10 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Which can also be viewed as
As a positive. I've got hands up, please. So let's call on people as Chenault has his hand up, please.
Will there be an audio feed for the meeting?
I would bring the state here and bring you to SLA. So there will be, yes, so the answer is yes. It'll be the same speakers that we usually use. The equipment differential is very, very limited. Because I'm still obligated to record the meeting and post it the next day. So it's not going to be live streamed.
Did we not, am I confusing meetings that it was on YouTube or something live?
It will not be live, but it will be on YouTube the next day.
We could live stream it.
We could, but. Then,
It's the commission that has live feeds.
One step at a time.
And is it fixed that we're going back in December to a hybrid meeting? You said it's one.
I've made no commitment, but it might actually be advisable to do that, because if we do a discussion of what has happened, let's see if we can then run a hybrid that attempts to, where we actively attempt to correct for some of the shortcomings. That may be the optimal thing. We run test 1 and then test 2. Now, of course, I have to point out right now, the way the law is written, this all goes away middle of next year. If the legislation isn't changed, there will not be hybrids. We're doing this, I guess, as in an abundance of caution to know what our options are, assuming that there is action taken.
Thank you. I learned something tonight that I did not expect, so I just want to make sure I am prepared for Thursday.
Mark, could you get closer to the mic? It's very hard to hear you.
I'm sorry, Chanel. I learned something tonight that I need to make sure the office is prepared for, and that is if we're going to have serial votes rather than a roll call, then the city charter requires that we have a written record of each member's vote. The roll call, of course, creates that record by itself, by its nature. So I will create a voting sheet for each person, which
No, that's not how we do it.
Okay. How do you?
The way we do it is that if it's less than a unanimous vote, you take down the names of those who are voting in the minority. Usually, if it's close, we have a roll call vote, yes, and then you will have every single one. But we found that functionally you get the same result by simply, if there are 5 people who are voting no and everyone votes yes, you write down the names of the 5, and then by virtue of that, how everybody voted.
Assuming that the majority includes the full board and no one was absent.
No, it is taken off the master attendance. And the attendance is taken 3 times. And
so we still do the attendance.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And simple thing that I've noticed, and this is right, catching up on things, and Brian, is that what we used to do, which was super helpful, is a binder that secretary, assistant secretary, and chair each had one with the full package. And those are the master records of the meeting. And so all notes are handwritten because it's usually easier. And then that's given back to you, Mark, to deliver to the staff member, prepares the minutes. And they have everything written down in there, including changes, who to talk to, whatever it is. And that way, the board member's job is complete at the end of the meeting, except for questions.
Right.
And it, from going through this from before COVID to after, that way was generally fail safe. Now, there's 20 different things going on. As far as what the record is.
So that explains why there's a cabinet inside that's filled with 3-ring binders. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this thing was transferred, you don't have to keep the old.
You don't have to,
There's a bunch of,
and there's a vote sheet as well, which is basically all our names. With this,
well, Amy has the spreadsheet, so we can use
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Are we done?
yeah, Katie, go ahead.
Are we done? I'm just trying to
I
figure out.
think we're done, yes, is there, I'm sorry. Is there, yes, question, go ahead.
I apologize. There's no exec in December?
Correct, there was no executive session.
when will we decide on the December board meeting?
Not tonight.
Communicate.
I will reach out to, you know, something tentatively, I would love to have a meeting the day after full board. I will reach out to everybody, but in the next, the day, or if it's not the day after, it'll be the beginning of the following week.
I would say, I would say, I think the office is gonna be really busy the day after. We're gonna have to get our resolutions out to for the rules hearing on Monday, the 20th. On Monday for outdoor dining, so I don't know.
Valerie, come closer to the mic. You can't be heard.
Sorry. I was just saying that the day after full board is very busy for the office and getting the resolutions out, or the chairs are trying to get their things into the office, to have some sort of, I don't know what this meeting is about, full board the day after, and then on Monday, the 20th, we have the hearing for outdoor dining that starts at 10 a.m. That people will probably be. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. So anyways, just of how, the question I guess was raised of how are we going to decide on what happens to December full board? I don't think that we should be letting people know a week ahead of time that it's going to be one way or the other. They should know at the beginning of the month. Holidays.
And they will. As I said, it may be. What I'm thinking right now is just the way we're running a test to see going full in person as a test. It would make the most sense to then run it hybrid, but having prepared to try to more consciously, minimize some of the problems that we've had. And to compare the two. So I would say then, right, for now, unless it turns out that, you know, Thursday is so extraordinary that it's like sort of an obvious thing, then let's say that December would be most likely a hybrid. Oh. That would make the most sense. You would have, but this would be something that we would actively prepare, like assigning roles for things and determine, and if that sort. And we'll look at it that way. All I can do is try, you know, see what works.
All right.
Thank you. Just a quick reminder about put the board package on the website no later than tomorrow night. So anyone who has resolutions or reports, please get them to us as soon as you can. I understand there's a lot of work involved. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any new business? Anything else? Any other things we did not? Okay, I will move to adjourn.
All right.
Thank you.
Me too. Thanks for all the hard work on these meetings.
Anthony, you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, that's right. It's recording.